Hello, and welcome to Moonshot webinar on venture viability. I'm Harsh Mishra, your faculty at Quantic with subject matter expertise in entrepreneurship and leadership. Before Quantic, I was a faculty at business schools in the United States, and I visited and worked with institutions around the globe. More interestingly, I have been an entrepreneur for several years in the space of entrepreneurial learning, and I have mentored scores of early and advanced stage startups. I have also participated in building entrepreneurial ecosystems in diverse parts of the world, starting with New York region back in 2001 to 2008. I have worked for large corporations in the early years of my career, but my interests have all along been in startups ever since the early 90s. All right, so first, let's spell out the Quantic context for this webinar. We have observed that a large number of capstone projects at Quantic EMBA program have been entrepreneurial in nature. Therefore, the idea of Moonshot came along to encourage several of these entrepreneurial ventures so that they revive and make progress in their real world. Quantic is to be a catalyst that further ignites your entrepreneurial potential and aspirations. So it is not just the dispensing of the prize money or investment to winning startups, but it also has the objective of further encouraging your entrepreneurial process or journey ahead. And why have we chosen viability as this webinar's topic? It is because viability of a venture is one of the most critical aspects to watch out for. That is why it is the first evaluation criteria to be used by Quantic faculty in the first round of Moonshot by your peer group voting at the second stage of shortlisting, as well as the guest experts who will evaluate the ventures in the final round of the Moonshot competition. Do make a note, when we say viability, we invariably also mean sustainability of your venture. These two are interdependent and correlated concepts. So we think that there is an important work ahead, invariably for all of you who are pursuing new ventures or startups. It is to make your ventures increasingly viable by doing a few things. First, pay attention and notice that your venture model might have been influenced by your background of working in a non-startup or in a large corporation. Realize that the context of an established company is substantially different from the realities of a startup. Hence, there is need to infuse appropriate startup sensibilities into your venture to increase your viability. And taking it beyond your Quantic capstone project, we realize that your proposed business model or strategy would need to be made more dynamic by learning from your real market or customers in systematic manner, deploying a methodology that is scientific and market-oriented. So how do we kick off this process today? First, we will touch on highly practical framework to improve the viability of your venture. It is called the lean methodology. It can set you on the journey from where you currently are to your MVP, that is your minimum viable product. The framework should take 25 to 30 minutes at best. This would be followed by a 10-minute Q&A on the topic of lean methodology. We will then break out into small groups and engage in an exercise for 20 minutes. I will elaborate on the group exercise before we break out for it. Finally, we will reassemble and hear the testimony from a few venture founders about the change that they feel they need to seriously consider after they have pitched and given feedback by others in their respective breakout group. The objective of this exercise is for venture founders to improve the viability of their venture. Now on the topic of lean methodology for enhancing startup viability. So first, what is the relevance of lean methodology? First reason why we are discussing this is because there is a high startup failure rate, more than 70%. That means less than 1/4 of startups really succeed. Given this truth in the matter, recently an important countervailing force has emerged, one that can make the process of starting a company less risky. This methodology is called the lean startup. Startups use lean methodology to improve their viability and reduce the probability of their failure. This is the relevance of lean approach. This is why startups adopt lean methodology. My own experience as a startup founder has been that a systematic, iterative, and progressive learning from short-term failures is the very fuel for improving the probability of one's success as a startup. Lean methodology reduces the risk of failures and enhances viability. After establishing its relevance for startup success, let's dive into what does the concept of lean methodology mean? It goes as follows. First, lean methodology is a choice of experimentation over elaborate planning. In elaborate planning, the assumption is that it is possible to figure out most of the unknowns of a business in advance before you raise money and actually execute the idea. But we know that business plans rarely survive first contact with customers. As a famous boxer said, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. Too elaborate a planning is generally fiction, and dreaming them up is almost always a waste of time. Startups are not smaller versions of large companies. Their context is very different. They do not unfold in accordance with master plans. Second, lean methodology prioritizes customer feedback over intuition. You can design great products in the comforts at your laboratories, but the lean methodology tells us that only after building and launching the product does the venture get substantial feedback from customers. When the sales force attempts to sell it, and too often, after months or even years of development, entrepreneurs learn the hard way that customers do not need or want most of the product's features. The startups that ultimately succeed go quickly from failure to failure, all the while adapting, iterating on, and improving their initial ideas as they continually learn from customers. Third, in using lean methodology, startups choose to iterate designs repeatedly and incrementally over the traditional big upfront design approach. It uses agile development techniques to do that. Long product development cycles presuppose knowledge of customers' problems and product needs, whereas agile development eliminates wasted time and resources by developing the product iteratively and incrementally. It is the process by which startups create the minimum viable products they test. In the lean methodology approach, the concepts of MVP, or minimum viable product, and pivoting are the central concerns of the lean methodology. In the startup world, operating in a stealth mode is declining in popularity. What is more critical is customer feedback. Aligning customers with your idea or solution matters more than secrecy, and constant feedback yields better results. So quite likely you would have heard of lean startups. It is becoming well known in the startup world these days. And the terms pivoting and MVP, you would have surely heard of. Okay, in case anyone has not paid attention, it is defined as we'll do briefly here. Note that all these terminologies are from the framework of lean methodology. Lean startup. A lean startup is a startup that is consciously or subconsciously using the lean methodology to build itself. Pivoting. Pivoting is a startup changing its strategy without changing its vision. And MVP. MVP is building viability into a product or business model before any major market launch through an interactive and market sensing process using minimum resources. Resources meaning time and money. But before we dive into further defining the lean methodology, first a bit of recent history of this methodology. and more importantly, the relevance of it all to answer why this methodology. History. It is quite a proven history there, a respectable one that too. First, this methodology has been predicted by many successful startups, as I earlier said, practiced implicitly or explicitly. Second, many of these startups have been inspired by the lean management or manufacturing practices used for decades by Toyota and likes, and scores of other successful MNCs worldwide. Third, at least some of you would have heard of Deming's framework and his work on total quality management. TQM has several characteristics that resembles the lean methodology. The methodology was a great business success since the 70s. And coming to the world of strategy, lean methodology resembles the Mintzberg Learning School, which is in debate with the strategic positioning or the frameworks like the 5 forces model practiced by Michael Porter and his likes in the design school that you already are very familiar with, or you would become very familiar with it in course of your capstone project work. Oh, you have already done that. So, but last but not the least, in the entrepreneurial world, the lean methodology has been taking on a greater sense of relevance and urgency. Also, startups have taken this lean methodology to a new level altogether. So again, with that history, what is the lean methodology for enhancing startup viability? This methodology recognizes that all too often, after months and years of development, entrepreneurs learn the hard way that customers do not need or want most of the product's features. In contrast, the startups that ultimately succeed go quickly from pivot to pivot, from failure to failure, all the while adapting, iterating on, and improving their initial ideas, business models, or strategy as they continuously and rapidly learn from their customers. So developing a product in isolation from the market is often doomed to failure, whereas a lean methodology for developing a product or service in interaction with the discovered customer reduces risk and enhances the chances of success. So learning from the customers or co-creating with your market is the central characteristics of lean methodology. So what are the key principles of lean methodology? Startups rather fail fast and frequent to prevent their failing altogether. What does this paradox mean? It means remove the fear of failure, grow confident to not fail ultimately, and learn about success from the process of conscious and expected failing. So the principles are fail fast to change. It is a hypothesis. If a hypothesis fails, pivot quickly and learn continuously and decisively. Over the course, these lean principles could reduce the risk of failing substantially for new ventures. Broadly speaking, constraints and the context are changing for the startups. Startups can have a lower probability of failure. In the past, growth and survival of startups were constrained by several factors, and let's list some of them out here. First, the high cost of getting the first customer and even higher cost of getting the product wrong. Second, the long technology development cycles. Third, the limited number of people with an appetite for risks inherent in founding or working at a startup. So this also functions as a constraint. Fourth, decentralization of access to financing. So venture capital used to be a tight club of formal firms clustered near Silicon Valley, Boston, and New York. But in today's entrepreneurial ecosystem, there are small-sized players. Worldwide, hundreds of accelerators like Y Combinator have begun to formalize seed investments. And crowdsourcing sites like Kickstarters provide another more democratic method of financing startups. Fifth is the concentration of real expertise in how to build startups. So these expertise were fairly concentrated, but all across the world, you could now find entrepreneurial hotspots. Sixth, the instantaneous availability of information is also a boon to today's new ventures. Before the internet, we all know, new company founders found getting advice difficult from experienced investors or entrepreneurs. But today, the biggest challenge is sorting through the overwhelming amount of startup advice you can get. So it has changed altogether. The lean concepts provide a framework that helps you differentiate the good from the bad amidst this plethora of information and democratization of funding and knowledge on startups. Now, let's use the analogy of a small airplane on a runway speeding to take off to understand the lean methodology for enhancing startup viability. It's a very effective analogy. Let's also add the constraints such as the stage of aircraft development, how it must have been at an early stage, going back to Wright brothers in the early years of the 20th century, around 1908 or 9. Let us also simulate the constraints of a small and limited length of the airstrip available to a small plane to take off. So small runway, limited. And the third constraint of fast and unpredictable wind. Dealing with the unpredictable wind to get the necessary lift, balancing the aircraft and advancing it, it is a process aiming to soar amidst this high degree of uncertainty and constraints. It's a good factor to take into consideration. We can imagine that the small plane has to be strategizing constantly, pivot continuously if some strategy did not produce desired results. Learn and deploy the new learning. Maximum number of necessary strategic shifts at shortest possible intervals. The true mission of a small airplane is to take off and complete the flight. It is not meant to conserve resources, rather to burn out fuel whenever needed to give necessary speed or momentum for takeoff, especially on a small airstrip, that too on a windy day, even with a nascent technology. As a startup founder, I hope you can feel like the pilot of this small plane, like the Wright brothers. If you can sense it, your mind must be working like a mind that is using the lean methodology. Here is a small video of a small plane takeoff. Let's watch it. Exciting. Okay, so there are numerous examples of lean methodology in action, bringing traction to a startup. Blue River Technology, for example, they came up with the idea of robotic lawn mowers for commercial usage. and initially for the market such as golf courses. But after using the lean methodology, once they repeatedly got out to the market to test the waters, that is after talking to over 100 customers in 10 weeks, they learned and moved from the commercial spaces to the farmers and found a huge demand for an automated robotic way to kill weeds without chemicals. So the farmers became their true market after pivoting. Here is another example of a startup using lean methodology. A startup with a battery product, a startup I cannot name, it applied lean methodology. They started searching for a business model and engaged in customer discovery. They met face to face with dozens of global prospects to explore potential new markets and applications. By the way, these were not sales calls. The team members left their PowerPoint slides behind and listened to customers' issues and frustrations with their status quo. They dug deep to learn how customers bought industrial batteries, how often they use them, and the operating conditions. And with this feedback, they made a major shift in their customer focus. You must have also heard of the concept of strategic trade-off and perhaps also used it for yourself. How a startup continues to persevere on the initially chosen strategic path versus the pressures of pivoting as necessary after the strategic learning. It is not easy for any startup to pivot, but the smart ones get to recognize it, embrace it, and they pivot swiftly to charge the lean course. They reap the benefits of such strategic decisions without losing their true vision or value proposition. Now, if you look at Mintzberg's School of Strategic Learning and Execution, so every new business entity that includes new ventures has an intended vision that it wants to realize, and it uses a deliberate strategy. However, due to the unpredictable and uncertain environment and factors out of their control, that a new venture faces some part of their deliberate strategy that goes unrealized. Executing the venture forward also brings about a new sense of market or industry reality. A critical customer feedback emerges, for example, that requires a strategic shift by the venture, and a new strategy emerges going forward. Hence, the realized strategy is not the same as intended vision. And what we get is a combination of some part of the deliberate strategy joined by the emergent strategy to give a new realized vision for the venture. There is a pressing need for pivoting, but that need clashes with the earlier need to maintain and persevere on the status quo. Entrepreneurs could be in love with their initial strategy and resist changing to a new one or to pivot. Lean processes in a startup tries to capture the emerging scenario and pivot meaningfully. New ventures listen to customers' identity. Listening to customers helps startups recognize a new business model, which is a primary task that a startup must anyway engage in. This is entirely different from executing against a given model, which is what established firms do. New ventures search for a business model, as on the left. Startups iteratively discover their customers and engage further in customer validation. Whereas established companies execute against a designed or planned business model, as on the right. Established companies have already created their customers and only need to expand and scale on company building. The lean methodology practiced by startups move from pivot to pivot advancing closer to their MVP or the minimum viable product. We can gain an understanding of the lean methodology also through an understanding of how science progresses. Science takes the approach of experimentation. Hypotheses are conceived that are subsequently accepted or rejected based on the findings of the experiment. If rejected, it is rehypothesized. Scientific processes always begin with a hypothesis to be tested. It identifies and constructs its hypothesis using constructs and variables and their hypothesized interrelationships. It then tests the hypothesis on real data in the field. The data analysis can conclude either way, to accept or reject the hypothesis. If the hypothesis is rejected, the new hypothesis is conceived, just like pivoting in the lean methodology. Hence, the lean methodology is a systematic, open, efficient, and decisive scientific process in a sense for the startup world. Lean methodology is making us move from the traditional business plan approach to the business model approach. More so, lean methodology proposes that the building of a business model be made even more lean. You all must have seen the business model canvas. If not, do have a look. It's a simple framework. It lays out a logical process of proposing a value, creating the value, delivering it to the market, and realizing the value by capturing part of it through profit. Every business entity operates with a business model, consciously or subconsciously. The lean canvas is a basic derivation from the business model canvas, suited for early stage ventures. It is a very primary and focused, before even worrying about the rest of the business model elements, and it is face-to-face with the market. Lean Canvas model focuses fundamentally on understanding and figuring out the problem that exists in the world or the market before even considering its possible solutions. It is listening to the market and looking to find or develop solutions through an innovative, frank, and forthright exchange, direct or indirect. And how to have solution that gives disproportionate or unfair advantage over any other competitor, and figuring out the metrics for measuring a possible value through this process. So do use the lean canvas, going back and forth into those 4 building blocks to make your venture idea more viable. Now for the next 10 minutes, the floor is open for any questions on lean methodology as a tool for making your venture more viable. Over to you. Any questions?
Hello, Dr. Harsh. I have one question.
Sure.
About customer feedback. What are the best forms of customer feedback? Because you can ask questions, obviously, but how important is it to have actual paying customers for parts of your solution?
It's a great question. To answer that, there is no set method that I have seen startups use in getting a sense of the market. One direction is going to a more informal method of getting a sense of the market, so that it's not so much dependent on formal market research, that you conduct a questionnaire survey, or rather I have seen methods like observing the behavior of the market or customers, engaging with them, also trying to be indirect about it, sometimes focusing a lot on the nature of their problem instead of the solution that you provide. And you try to create a setting so that the questions that you may or may not have eventually come up. You begin to recognize what are those important questions. So you may not get a direct answer, but if you begin to crystallize those questions, I think you're advancing in the direction of getting to know your market well. And a lot of times also you do not know which is your market. You may have started with the target market as per your intuition. When you conceptualized your value proposition or your product and the kind of solution that you have for your chosen problem, you may have had your own intuition that, or maybe based on your experience, that there is a gap and perhaps the customer needs this or market needs this. However, all those conceptualizations can be in for a surprise. So you go in for a with a very open mind, ready to have your hypothesis rejected, just like in the scientific process. So you try to engage with them. And another important characteristic that I have noticed is the qualitative. So instead of depending excessively on the quantitative aspects, you try to get the qualitative assessment of what your market needs as a solution to their problems. So you try to hit upon some of those narratives, which you can write as a story. These are the pain points for your market. So I can say from the story that there is a definite demand for your solution for the specified problem. So that's in a nutshell. There is no set method, but you try several ways of connecting with your market. And once you have more clarity and you come back with clearer questions, you can develop better metrics and formulation of your renewed hypothesis, right, if necessary, and go into the market for further validation. So this is the process that it follows.
Thank you. Very
Dr.
clear.
Hirsch, I have a
Yes.
question for you.
Sure.
So my target market is actually interesting. We have two. It's a B2B and a B2C. B2C, doing questionnaires, surveys, will give us our qualitative and our quantitative research on what needs we're going to be satisfying. But B2B a bit more difficult. So I'm not going to be able to probably get a hold of the president or something like that, or to ask them those questions. So what I'm doing, I'm reading their business prospectuses, their business forecasts and plans, looking for the areas that they want to improve in, and using that as my research as to how to fill their pain points. Is that a good method, or should I be adding something else for that B2B discovery?
Right. I think your effort is quite logical and very rational. So you can try that and see what kind of insights you can generate from it in a B2B situation. One thing I have seen in B2B is because the beginning on a B2B path always happens with perhaps one company which is trying to give you a break for the product that they would possibly use. So that requires, of course, any company before taking on your product would want to have some validation, but they are the first one in this case. So I think starting again very lean to have them try your product at a very small scale at the periphery of their business, perhaps. And that's how, if you can get a leeway in that way, you can build it up from further validation, because you would have some of those outcomes and metrics to spell out, right? So you try to take a lead into a business, try to create some proof of your product, proof of concept, and then that could become a basis for other companies to take it on. right? Because in the industry, especially, I mean, it's hard to hit a market leader, but at the same time, these businesses are looking for startups, to solve their problems, because no large business is equipped enough to take care of all its problems. And they're not agile. They're not they're quite rigid in their way to understand the market. They mostly know the established ways. But as a startup, you have an advantage. You have gone into the market, you have sensed it, you have looked at the problem with a very bare eyes and try to come up with a solution. Therefore, you have an advantage. When you talk to a B2B person, any lead that you have gotten, they understand that you have that advantage. However, they would want your product to be in certain shape and form, at least in a testable stage. So you can only do it at a small scale, because doing it at a bigger scale, and they would not be investing, well, there's no general rule. You may get some company to invest at a very early stage of your venture, but I have seen normally that does not happen. So they want to see some proof of concept at a smaller scale, at some corner of the organization, and then they are willing to take it up and try it further. So again, this is a lean methodology that you adopt even in a B2B situation.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent. That's a great question, because also it's linked to one question that I have, which is about secrecy and looking for your customer feedback. The secrecy, especially if we are a business to business, is key. So which are the key elements, Professor, that you can see in order, because it's your business, it's your child, and you are being in this development, and start to show it to the world, to put it this way. What are the key elements that you can see to do the pivot inside this startup, to start to reveal some of the key elements in order to get this valuable customer feedback?
Sure. Now that's a good question. I'm getting very good questions on B2B as well. So it is a balancing act, to tell you the truth. So you have stealth. There is value in keeping your idea in a stealth mode. And there is value, as the lean methodology would suggest, in opening your product to be tested, at least by the market, and in some cases, some other stakeholders also. As a matter of fact, a lot of your secrecy or stealth aspects do get revealed even in when you engage with any potential investor. And the potential investor, unless they know about certain aspects, they cannot invest. So they ask for it, and yes, you can still try to maintain the secrecy, but ultimately there is good amount of revelation that goes in. But the other fact is, the problem that you are solving and the solution that you are coming up with, I can tell you that other than ensuring your intellectual property rights, and for which there are several methods. I mean, you have to be creative about it as to what can ensure that nobody takes away your IPR. Usually what I have seen is the startups or anybody in the competition would not play around with your IPR, right? Especially if you have taken some protections, and those protections are all too common. So I think startups have learned very many ways to protect their IPR, or those essential aspects of secrecy which they need. Beyond that, I think the lean methodology, or in general, startups engage in opening themselves up, sharing the necessary information with the market, with the investors, because unless they do that, they cannot get the reactions. They cannot get those insights from the market to be able to assess how good or bad their product is, right, or services. So I know it's a dilemma, but I think that is the point which was there in one of the previous slides, that is becoming less popular to play too too stealthily in the game, because it prevents you. I mean, if you, for example, wait until your beta, to be out in the market, and you have already traveled a lot of journey, you would have missed out on several inputs that you could have gathered in the lean process. So that's the downside of maintaining the secrecy. But there is a justification for it, but it's a balancing, and in depending on your startup, you make an assessment, but just be open to the value which is there in both. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, at least make me think. Thank you.
Hey, Dr. Hirsch, I have a question. I hope we have time for this. I know Q&As can really stretch quite a long time. So basically, for a startup which is playing in the enterprise B2B space, they've startup which has created a product and is bringing it out to customers, and typically in the customer validation, customer discovery stage. What is considered to be an ideal, say, number of customers where you can consider that the startup has reached what is called a product market fit? So is it like one customer? Is it 5 customers? Is it 10 customers? Is there a benchmark out there which can which you can qualify that okay, you can be called to have reached a product market fit stage? Because typically in the enterprise B2B for a startup, as opposed to a B2C, can be quite challenging in order to bring forward your solutions to the enterprise space, and for getting even getting trial customers, even getting customers to check out the product, suss out the product, and even use and give feedback and things like that. So what can be considered to be a stage where you can be where one can say that you've reached product market fit? Is there something like that? Is there a benchmark? Is there a validation in the market in terms of how many customers do you need to have to be called that you reached PFM?
Okay, I get your question. Thank you for sharing this. This is a very valid question again, and I would say it is about getting to that point yourself. There is no set number per se that anybody looks for. It is in relationship to, first of all, what is your market? One could be whether you're in B2B or B2C, but you happen to be in B2C. I'm not too sure. But let's say if it's B2C, what is the market size? And in your business plan, where are you, let's say, before the product market fit stage? And if you have given a business plan so that break even or some tipping point happens 3 years later, they would want to see whether you would travel this journey of 3 years where you will maximize your market potential, whatever you have conceived as to what part, how much of market share you'll acquire eventually of that market. Of course, it's not a defined market, but let's say you'll be getting a substantial. But what is that number of the substantial? So where are you beginning? Because what they do not want to see is a very steep gradient, because I know that scaling happens after the product market fit, and resources come in from the investors through any of the Series A, B funding, and then it's just a matter of scaling, right? But for them to gain that confidence that, okay, your product has reached a scalable, reasonable scalable stage, right? So that it's almost on a sort of a autopilot mode, in the sense that more resources to be pumped in would result in a larger scaled operation. So that sense you should have as a founder, that you have brought in sufficient traction for your product. So the market has, so it could be in a corporate scenario, it could be maybe, let's say if you're targeting for 2 or 3 industries, have you hit upon at least one significant customer with your proof of concept, or have shown some sort of an inclination to take it up. So I think there is no quantitative number, but qualitatively, yes, you should be able to get just before the point of being scaled up, right? I think that is the conviction in product market fit, so that you can go out and say, yes, I do have reached the stage of product market fit. So it is qualitative mostly in nature, and it depends on the startup and the idea or the problem that you're solving.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So I know that we have limited time, and so I would maybe in future organize a longer Q&A sessions, but you can always write to me with your question, and I will try to get to you with the answers.
Groups and engage in an exercise for 20 minutes. So before we get into the breakout session, allow me to tell you about the exercise that you will do in your respective Zoom breakout rooms, and also about part 2 of the exercise. The prime objective of this breakout session is for you to have your venture gain impromptu external inputs from your peer group as a proxy for your market. There are 3 components of the breakout session. In the first component, once you are in your respective breakout room, one venture founder among you in your breakout group will pitch to your peer group. The venture founder will describe to the peers what problem do you want to solve and what solution do you have until now. For the second component, your peer group in the breakout room will give their feedback or views specifically on 2 questions. First, what they just heard from the venture founder, is that truly a problem or a pain point from their perspective? And second, as a potential consumer, as an honest and forthright consumer, not as a friend or colleague, do you truly find value in the offered solution for that stated problem? And ultimately, would you be ready to dispense your valuables, that is your money, to purchase or consume the solution that the venture founder just pitched? Third, the pitching founder will evaluate the feedback he or she receives, taking down notes on any shifts or changes in your solution or direction as a result of inputs, feedback from your peers in the breakout group session. Later, you, the venture founder, would need to present or discuss your decision in front of all those who are in this webinar session when you come back into the breakout session. I have shared a Google Sheet link with you all, where the pitching venture founder can organize each component of this exercise. I had earlier shared this link in the Calendly invitation, and also I have it here in the chat box. So do click on this, have a browser page open, have your, and now itself, before you get into this breakout room, and use it, use this framework. It's the Google Sheet during your interaction in the breakout room. Also, do save it as a bookmark for future reference. In the post-breakout session, we will all reassemble The pitching venture founders from each breakout group will then tell us if they will change their solution or direction of their venture based on the feedback they received. If they consider a change, in what way? If not, then why not? So just give me a few moments to launch the breakout groups. Okay, so you can go to your respective breakout rooms starting now.
That's our quick question, if I may.
Yes, please.
So we have an enthusiastic group on my side. A number of us are actually here. So I'm curious, as these breakouts happen, if we get spread out, it might be a little redundant. What's the process for making sure one representative is in the breakout sessions?
Representative from among yourself, or?
I've got 3 or 4 other teammates that are on this call right now who are excited and involved, but
Okay.
do you understand the question?
No, I couldn't. Can you just tell me the essence again?
Sure. So
what is
so
your concern?
I'm assuming that we're breaking out into multiple breakout sessions.
Yeah.
So theoretically, 4 of my team members could be in 4 separate breakouts, which means you've got this concept being delivered by 4 different people,
Okay, I
4
got you.
separate, right? So
Right.
what's the best way to make sure that maybe either we're grouped together or we set expectations on what we should all
No,
be doing?
actually, the mechanism we have for breakout rooms, it does not permit to club all 4 of you in one group. So it is a random process. What I would do is, even if you are in different groups, you can exchange notes there later, right? So that you could be on one page, or you could maximize your learning. That's the best we can do.
Okay. And so if folks aren't interested in pitching, then maybe this would be the time when they would drop off.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Or I'm just jumping in for your situation. If you have 4 people in your group, one person could pitch one in the group. The other 3 could just listen and give their input to other people's pitches.
That's true.
Hey, Dr. Hirsch, another question. In the breakout rooms, is it possible to share screen in case any of the pitchers had a recording already on the web, and instead of actually verbalizing it, and it tends to take up a lot of time, which I found in the earlier session that we had, that unfortunately there was, because none of us were really practiced to pitch impromptu all of a sudden. So one of the folks actually took a long time to explain the concept, and that took up the entire. So is it possible to just share screen, and maybe if there's a video recording of the pitch, anybody wanted to pitch, to just do a 2 to 3 minute video recording of the pitch itself? Is it possible to share screen in the breakout rooms?
You'll have to check that feature. I haven't tried that.
Okay.
If that is possible.
Okay.
I think I have seen it, except unless the settings have been different. I'm glad that you brought that up. So I can, sort of look into various features and ensure that. But yeah, I think in general, it should be there. I'll be visiting each group and checking. So maybe I'll check the feature there. If you can, your basic concern is if you can pull up your presentation or
that's exactly the case. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So
most likely you should be able to do it, but just in case there is any problem, I don't know, I can make that setting change as we are in the process,
Okay.
So most likely it should, but try it. Okay.
Okay. All right.
1 second. All right. All right. So we would be breaking out very shortly. And I have chosen 12 breakout rooms. All right. So you'll have to go into respective sheets and just go up to room number 7, and we'll do the interaction, come back, reassemble, and then we do the review part. Okay, great. So I'm activating this now.
Hey, sorry, nobody was in my room.
Okay, you went to which room?
6.
6. Okay, you're Jenna?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to assign you to room 1. Okay.
Love it.
So it looks like everyone is here. Welcome back from the breakout session. Hope you had a productive time interacting and providing input to the pitching venture founder. Maybe more than one person pitched. So one representative of the pitching venture would now tell us in a few minutes what they gained. First, if they will change their idea, product, strategy, vision after receiving input from their peers in the breakout room. Change, yes, no, maybe. And second, if yes, in what way do you see and understand that change? If no change, why not? Please do not take more than a few minutes to tell us that. So let's start. Let me pull up the Google Sheet. One second. I'm not sure if how you have used it. Maybe you used the time to.
We didn't get access to the Google Sheet beforehand, so did not use it.
Okay, that Google Sheet link was shared in the invitation itself. If you had noticed, there was a request. Maybe you didn't get a chance to read it. That's okay. Maybe in case the groups missed that, it was there specified in the invitation itself. You can, I'll just share the link right here for now. And you can go back and fill it out and send it to me if possible. So can you see the sheet now in front of you?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so I'll share the link with you and you can fill it out for your session and share with me. Well, anyway, none of it is, here is the link. No, this is not the link. I'll have to, 1 second. Okay, I'm posting it just in case. You can open it and save it for yourself. So this only gives a structure, to your presentation and defines the exercise. It gives you an example. So you can just take out maybe that portion or do it. So for each room, if you can do it, it's just for my maintenance of the information, what went on in the sessions. Okay, so having said that, let me now ask each group, one representative or whoever pitched to share your experience and learning.
Well, my name's on this sheet. I'm happy to go. I'm Jenna. Hi.
Okay. Hi, Jenna.
So I don't know, do you want me to get into the startup at all or just the feedback?
Well, since we have a few minutes, you can give a sense of the, as you see in the sheet here, the problem you solve in your venture, the solution you have proposed in your venture, and then the interaction and the outcome of the interaction.
Sure. So for a little context, the company's name is Toaster. It stands for Takeout as a Service, kind of a play on food service and technology. To give some context, through COVID, consumers have changed the restaurant landscape, right? We know consumers are no longer requiring physical locations for restaurants to service them. And so Toaster presents a franchise services model that'll work to bring new franchises to market through a delivery only, digital only approach, and serve as a conduit to data that's going to support their future franchise growth. So the challenge that we're actually facing here is that, the franchise market in the US is pretty antiquated. It's old, it's really ripe for disruption. And the costs and risks for franchisors and franchisees to get into new markets is pretty substantial. So we kind of attack this head on, right? So the concept is we would come into a new market for a either new to franchise or mid-market franchisor. We would open up a ghost kitchen and we would actually launch that brand digitally in this new market. So through Grubhub, through Uber Eats, through Postmates, et cetera. And we would fulfill those orders from a ghost kitchen. If you guys aren't familiar, like we'd have a floor of on the 13th floor of a commercial building, where we wouldn't actually be engaging with the consumers, right? We would lean on the Grubhubs, et cetera, to come pick up the order that we fulfilled. Now, simultaneously, we'll be capturing data to feed back to the franchisor to say, hey, been in market for 6 months. Here are the pockets of consumers. This is where they are. This is where they're ordering from. Use this data to now go sell your franchise market on the ground, right? And then we will slowly exit the market. So the challenge that we're helping is we're really helping fast track kind of a frictionless approach to franchise growth in new markets.
Okay.
Does the concept make sense?
Yes, that's very interesting. And what was your peer group feedback? Did
Peer
you
group
capture any?
feedback was really strong.
Okay.
I got a lot of validation, which was, it's always nice. I would say a nice nugget that I learned, we talked a little bit about the familial component of a franchise, right? And how there's these quarterly meetings, annual meetings, people getting together, these owners know each other. And so if we're going to buy into this franchise, it's going to be important to have a face of that franchise, right? Someone in that market that can represent Toaster in that environment. Because at the end of the day, all franchisees put money into marketing budgets that help support the market. And so having a presence there is going to be important. And being a person, not an organization, I think is going to be important. One of the challenges that we also discussed, which I walked into this known, but got validation. I want to buy the digital franchise rights to this new market. That's a new concept for franchise. That's going to be really hard to convince them to allow us to do, right? So I want to own those digital rights. So when I end up exiting the market, I can still take a piece of every digital order that flows through our tech system, which will be a layer of routing logic between all these new franchisees that pop up. So we talked a lot about that. I know I've got a bunch of other members of my team on here that probably also spoke about this concept. I don't know if you guys got any good feedback that's relevant here, or if you want to share that also.
Yeah, quickly, if somebody else can fill in here. From
Yeah, this is Josh.
Yes, Josh.
I think we really need to run with the data science angle first and foremost. I think that's one of the things that we really need to flesh out and really build into this as a catalyst to making this work, and how we can kind of go back to these franchises and say, hey, we can make you understand this data science a lot better than Grubhub or one of the other delivery services that probably just has it as a tertiary element to their environment. When you think about a restaurant going in there and putting their menu items up, they're not really necessarily concerned with all the data science that's behind it. And so if we can kind of launch in here with a data science angle and really make it easy for them to understand how important it is that they comprehend all that different data, I think that could really help sell the idea.
Okay, good. It'll be a hard sell to individual franchisees, but when you, let's say, do a complementary work or service providing to Jenna and a startup, maybe some sort of a credibility through an organization could set in. So good, you are trying to explore some synergy there. And so this feedback turned into some sort of teaming up in a sense for future, some complementary aspects. But of course, the core idea of the exercise was to give as tough a feedback as possible, right? Because that's what markets do. Markets do not become your collaborator.
They do a very independent evaluation, and adopting that mindset in a peer group, it's very difficult, I understand. So it is because you mostly will explore areas to work together or help each other, so that's very natural. But maybe this could be a trigger for you, Jenna, to kind of really explore the space with the model that you are approaching. Because yes, I think there are problems on both franchisor and the franchisee front, and they are largely not solved. So if you have carved out the space, value space, I do not see why you would not. But then you'll have to go leaner, right? And really use the methodology to grow in your confidence, right? That the viability aspect, that's the core idea of us. Wonderful. So thank you very much, Jenna and Josh, for sharing. Room 2, anybody?
Hi, Doctor. I am Inkita. I was from room 2, but I'm on the same team with Jenna and Josh.
Okay.
So I would only add to that and say that, yes, I got validation from the group saying that it's a great idea to move forward with, but there were a few things that they wanted me to think about if it happens to go internationally. We haven't discovered how we want to move forward, but at this point, it's more about United States because that's where most of our, I would say, team resides. But one thing that was thrown at me by the team members who were from France and other parts of Europe is that in Europe, people like to be social, especially after COVID. They want to eat outside. They want to spend time outside and see, hey, we've been inside the house for so long. Why should we order more food to sit inside the house and eat it? Well, my selling point was that we're not trying to take away that social life from you. We're still having that social life there for you and say, enjoy it. But at the same time, let's say you see an advertisement on the TV and you love certain food that is not inside, within your reach. We're trying to bring that food to you within your reach, enjoy it. Even when say you're watching a movie in the night. I'm not saying don't go in the morning. I'm saying when you're just having some comfort time, you can have that within your reach, within your fingers and say, let me enjoy it. So I understood that part of that, like, if we try to go internationally, we try to even within US, we have to have a great selling point. We have to have a good marketing strategy to prove it both to the franchise and the people who are consuming that it's worth their time, it's worth their effort, and so is ours. So yeah, that is something I would like to explore with my team.
Wonderful. So I think you got a very good feedback because this whole eating out culture, and I've seen that in Asian cultures, how they view it, in Europe, how they view it, or how in the United States, they're quite different. How much of eating out or restaurant experience people want to have. So I think that is a very, very valid idea, and especially if you're planning to launch out as something which will outreach the international market, what would be the degree of acceptance? So I think there is great scope for you testing out in a lean way what is the market saying, right? And that may help you pivot as we discussed.
So just a quick question for that.
Yes, please.
Annika, so your business, you're B2B, but to convince a B2B to take you on, you have to show them a relationship between B to C. Is that right?
Team, do you want to jump in?
Because if you're franchising, by franchises, they depend on customers. So you convince this B2B that there's a B2C component for them or to take this.
So we'll actually be the franchise. So we'll buy in and we'll operate that franchise in a ghost kitchen capacity. And we will market ourselves through standard delivery services like Grubhub, Postmates, Uber Eats.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I love that ghost kitchen concept. Right, that's the terminology thrown in there. But would I like to get a little bit more sense of what that ghost is in a business sense, right? Because people not going physically into a space is one thing, but the market has a way to find out exactly what is happening, right? But I'm just saying some sort of attract, some sort of something would have to go into it in your public relations or any kind of a marketing effort.
right? To really give validity to this concept of ghost kitchen, because you are operating with it, right? And that's a critical part of your business model. Good. So give it a thought. These are all very valid interactions and comments. Okay, room 3, anybody?
Yeah, Surab,
Anybody
do you want to go,
Okay.
or I can?
Yes.
Hi,
Joseph,
Dr.
maybe
Harsh.
you can go first, and then I can add on. We discussed 2 ideas, so maybe Joseph, you go ahead.
Yeah, so I think Surab's one we got into a bit more of it in depth. So with mine, the problem that our venture's solving is with events, ticketing, and in general social engagement. There's a lot of I guess data gathering, a lot of issues with like the ticketing sales process, secondary market scalping. What our team's developing is effectively a direct, I guess what you'd call a artist to community, or artist to fan community experience, or experience economy platform, where we're basically using the blockchain to simplify and basically remove a lot of the requirements and the issues that currently people are experiencing. Things like having to put in a lot of personally identifiable information, not being able to track the sales of tickets, and in particular we're targeting independent artists in things like music events and live events, where like they don't necessarily have the budget and the access to establish enterprise tools or ticket sales management systems. And we're offering a more direct experience between the fans and the artists, and even the event location hosts. So in effect, it's sort of like a meetup type model, where we're providing peer-to-peer sales, SaaS, and anyone, whether it's the artist representative, community fans, can establish the community, and then through that create events, create ticketing, create a lot of engagement options. Through the event, through the ticketing, they can do post-ticketing merchandise, etc. So
okay, good. So Joseph, we have a sense of your venture, and could you say something specific about if you captured anything from your interaction as a feedback or something for consideration?
Yeah, so I guess when we were discussing, because it covers a variety of different segments, so clarifying, I think one of the feedback from Surab and Andrew in the group was clarifying which value propositions we're targeting initially, because we've identified it's an experience economy platform, but there are different angles and different entry points, and so that's actually something we're honing right now, because we're working on the capstone this week. But basically, yeah, it's one of those areas where we see that any one of those kind of entry points is really relevant. Obviously, we don't have the time to go out and do the market research at the moment. So we're basing a lot of it on kind of insights and existing academic research. But the main problem with that is a lot of that data comes from pre-COVID. So, post-COVID, there's a lot more variations and differences in behavior and perspectives.
Okay, so Joseph, I see there's a lot of potential for your venture, as well as Ankita, who spoke. I think there's great value in going out to the market and really exploring potential for any kind of any strategic choice you make. Before that, you'll have to validate your own thinking with the market, right? So earlier the better, because I see a lot of scope, blockchain and ticketing for the events. And as the group rightly said, there are so many value propositions. Which one you want to focus on? So when you make that choice, it should be the appropriate choice. not pick one. And that appropriateness would come from perhaps devising some method of going and putting yourself out there, in the market, and really see where does this blockchain technology be able to create appropriate value proposition, right? Okay, Josh,
thanks.
were you saying something? You are on mute. No, okay, great. All right, so thank you, Joseph.
Yeah, Dr. Harsh, we actually discussed two ideas. If I can briefly explain the other one as well for group 3.
Yes, please. Okay, quickly.
Yes. So the thing which I proposed, and the problem was rural electrification, and especially this was a product in Indian market, and rural electrification and internet access. This is a device, and then in the initial phase of validation, I realized the market is not that big, especially because of the changing need in the Indian context, and I was looking for input on whether to add more features and relaunch it in urban context, or look for other geographies where rural electrification problem is significant. And I think we had some representation from places like Africa, and also Joseph gave us very, very good feedback. And we kind of, I think I appreciated some of the inputs about, instead of urban, there are still a lot of places where rural electrification is a problem. And then how to reduce a cost if one has to go to another geography could be, setting up the manufacturing in that local area, rather than, trying to export as an assembled unit. So this was something I never thought. These are small products, but of course, then it means strategy, collaborating, entering into a foreign market, understanding the licenses. And but these hints were interesting. I mean, I was thinking on how to do it in the local context, but probably sometimes this the relevance of the product is also in some other geography. So
okay, that's good, Saurabh. I think it's a very interesting area you're working in, and rural area needing both electricity supply and to be able to consume internet. So many, while accessibility is undeniable, that anywhere people need that accessibility to internet. But what kind of internet products would be consumed, and then the cost is a factor. So there are several factors we can think of, whether it be rural, it'll be semi-urban, pure urban, because there are pockets of depravity is everywhere, right? People are, so whether it is the urban poor or less, in developing countries, that's very, very common. But for you to really test out your proposition, you can use Lean Canvas, I can see, to sort of narrow down your problem and the solution, and where you can go deeper to really see your unfair advantage, and can you crystallize some of those metrics? So I think Lean Canvas, maybe you should dive a little deeper into this methodology, and I can see it will be very useful for you,
in that context,
really narrow down.
Yeah, in that context, Dr. Harsh, and relating to your previous discussion, one quick question. Mm-hmm. How do you decide how much to budget for customer validation? I mean, how do you decide in the Lean Canvas? Because that is something in these small products, right? I mean, if you try experimenting in multiple geographies, how do you go with a hypothesis and decide, okay, these are multiple approaches, which one should I select and how much I should budget for?
Right. So I would say don't spend too much time on budgeting, right? It has to be the least budget possible. That's always the focus at the lean stage, early stage. But wherever there's a critical need to really discover one or two meaningful customer, which is representative of your market, I think that having some budget for that nature is fine. You can selectively put in your resources where you can extract some value. So there are no straightforward answer, and they cannot be very hard budgeting in early stage. But you will see that the process itself will guide you where you can put in your time and money, you know, and what will generate some sort of a confidence in you to take the next step, right?
Understood.
So
Thank you.
good, great. Anybody else from other rooms? I know we have crossed the time.
Hi, yeah, Dr. Harsh, yes, just a quick few minutes. I was hoping to be able to share screen, but then ultimately I found that it's been disabled by the host. So the next time that you have a session like this, maybe you activate it so that, you know, I was basically hoping to wrap up very quickly, but my roommates were so kind and, you know, tolerant of me, and they allowed me to take up the entire, you know, 10, 15 minutes. So I just took up, I was hoping to take not more than 3 to 5 minutes. So anyway, just to talk about what we discussed, Tessa and Milan, my roommates, were really nice and sweet people. So I'm basically the CEO and founder of a company which has produced a software product, which is an enterprise B2B SaaS product, which has already gone beyond MVP, actually. Right. So, we are constantly adding on features because it's on trials at many different customer locations. So every customer is requesting this feature, that feature, and so on and so forth, which is where we are trying to accommodate that part. So this product, what it does is it's an enterprise physical asset management. It's a comprehensive physical asset management software, which is a cloud-based product. So it's a SaaS product. For small and medium enterprises. Initially, we are basically trying to focus on the Asia market because of obviously accessibility reasons, and we are based out of Asia and so on and so on. But I think based on the feedback given by my roommates, it appears that there could be a potential demand in other parts of the world as well. So that I'm happy to take note of that. And there were good questions which came up from the room in terms of pricing and go-to-market strategy. So I was not able to answer those questions, Pat, and because very clearly I have not really fixed any, you know, any price point or you know, fixed go-to-market strategy yet. Why? Because right now I'm just focusing on getting my first 100 customers and letting the customers dictate, you know, the sweet spot, which maybe customer A has a sweet spot this, so I'll know how to define that customer, that category, that industry. Customer B has a sweet spot which is different, and then basically the sweet spot pricing will evolve along the line. So pricing is something that I didn't have an answer yet, but it will evolve. I'm quite sure of that. Right now, focus is really on hitting the, you know, getting the rubber to the road and getting the first 100 customers. And these are enterprise customers. They're not like it's not a B2C. So there's always a little bit of a challenge getting an enterprise product and looking for enterprise customers because it's not easy. And thanks to this Delta and Omicron and all these, God knows what is around the corner, these variants have really driven everybody nuts. Screwed up the market, screwed up, you know, business demand, and things are getting delayed and so on and so forth. But hopefully, the turnaround is around the corner.
Right.
This is a like a matured industry, but what we are trying to do is do it differently than what people have been used to. So that is the fundamental, you know, proposition about the product. Yeah, so I won't talk much more about it. So
no, that's I think we definitely very interesting area. What's your name?
Sorry, I forgot to. So Dave.
Dave. Okay, Dave.
Yeah.
So I think first of all, the feedback you got from your group, somebody that it is a global market, right? The market you are in, the product that you have. So right now, you say that you have an MVP, okay, and then you are also in the process of you know, customer discovery.
So we have a few paying customers. We have about 10 plus customers in using the product. They're beta customers. On the one hand, we have paying customers who had a very specific need, and this software meets that particular need. Although their requirement is just scratching the, you know, tip of the feature list of the product. So that's why I say it's still in the customer discovery journey, because we are figuring out what this type of customer, what this industry needs it for, what that industry needs it for, because it's a general purpose physical asset management product. Anybody could potentially use it.
Yeah, right. No, I have seen startups in the space and different parts of the world. Not exactly with the same model that you have, but I think you have a few customers, but I think you're still in the process of customer discovery, which is fine. I mean, when you say those 100 customers, it is a discovery process. That. So you would benefit from the methodology that we discussed today, right? Probably you're familiar to some extent, quite an extent, but you should explore it further, because MVP is also a little tricky concept. I can tell you one experience. We had some interaction at one of the known incubators where we had about 40-50 of startups who thought that they have an MVP, but it turned out if you really go through a rigorous definition of MVP, so that the concept really helps, only about 20% of them were actually there, right?
Okay.
So it's all right. So how do you bring that process in so that if the MVP in your mind it's there, but you still need to go through certain iterations, certain process,
sure,
then might as well take them up, and
sure.
So that will build a certain kind of confidence, because after that stage, yes, especially in your domain, investors would look at you with a lot of interest, so there are several SaaS product investors, and they're waiting. That's one of the key questions they ask. What stage are you, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So should they look at you as an investor, or should they look at you to engage as a mentor, or if they are very interested, they can engage with you as a mentor. So yeah, I mean, those possibilities become better crystallized. Great, Dave. So good. Anybody else we have like to quickly talk? I know we have crossed the time. I really appreciate everyone to hang on for a little longer. I know these sessions really have no control. It just goes beyond. Even we were scheduled for an hour and a half, but we've gone past 10-15 minutes. All right, so let's call it a day today. Emma, I'm sure you have exchanged contacts and names, and you will connect with each other because you have heard each other out. So there could be some tip off from there and they should always ask, okay, what is happening with that venture, right? You should put that question to any venture founder who pitched to you, or if you really gave any critical feedback, you would want that to be taken to some logical end, some resolution. So it's good to keep in touch. And all right, let's call it a day. If you have any question, you can always contact me on Help Scout, and we will see how we can address it. We are trying to build an ecosystem in coming year or so. Then perhaps you would have a better supporting environment where some of the specific aspects can be. But I'm hoping that you will all participate in the Moonshot competition. One round of shortlisting has already happened, and going down, there will be others who would become a part of it. But really, as I said earlier, it's not just about the prize money, but it's really instigating the energy so that you continue to be on your meaningful path that you have. All right, thank you very much. Not like friends and family, I specified that because authenticity of feedback can only ensure that the new venture can use it for their re-strategizing, and if necessary, to pivot and move closer to their MVP, as it was in Dave's case. Also, hope that you carry out the rhythmic lean process. It is rhythmic in nature, of generating or improving viability for your venture through interaction with your external stakeholders, especially with your market, as direct to true potential customers as possible. So that is a problem, a challenge that every venture faces, that you openly and repeatedly test your hypothesis product, not be content with just one strategy that you have put in your mind, but really re-strategize, right? And especially between the stages of your prototype and MVP. And yes, as I said, do a lean canvas exercise for your representative market. Stay open about who is your true market. Engage with them and listen to them. That is, do your customer discovery. That is a key word. So it was good to have you at the webinar today. We conclude the session here. Take care and stay safe. And hopefully this year would see the end of the pandemic. You know, as they was sharing that concern, it has slowed things down, but it's been widely now believed that we could be soon be getting to our normal, right? Some kind of a new normal, but stay safe and see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Dr. Hirsch. Thanks, everyone.
Sure. Take care.